So hello and welcome to a new episode of Clever Together. And today, in an era where war is a reality for many of us, I wanted to talk about the communication around war at work. Ukraine is at war. And I have to confess that this was a very difficult podcast for me to plan and record. But I think sometimes you just have to address the pink elephant in the room. I'm split. I have to confess. I have a wonderful client in the UK whose mum is stranded in the Ukraine. All she sees is bombs and fear. On the other hand, I have clients in politics and the military. It was this clash of perspectives that actually inspired me to talk about communication in times of war. How might this war be affecting people? I'm not talking just directly the people who have loved ones back in Ukraine. I'm also thinking about people who tend to take things very sensitively. A lot of ADHD people, for example, will be really struggling right now because of the intensity of this. Former refugees and immigrants also will be reminded of their time. Culture runs deep, affecting our values at a subconscious, often unfathomable way. But remember, now is not the time for pity. There is never a time for pity. What you need to express these times is compassion and support. Coping with a situation like this is a little bit like grief. Everybody copes with it differently. My coach, Irina, needs to keep going as much as possible. She reached out to me last week and said, please, let's make an appointment. I'm trying to keep life on track. She's using work to escape, to keep track of where she is. It's her lifeline right now. And that's great. It's one approach, but it's not one that works for everyone. And she too, or other people taking this strategy too, need to be careful not to dive too much into that side either. So if you do know somebody like that who maybe just can't face going home to an empty flat, maybe some sociable distraction would do the trick. Something as simple as going out for a bite to eat, or maybe going for a shop with the females, or playing some billiards with the guys or something. But try and be supportive. Just be there for them. Just listen. Other people just don't have the headspace to deal with more than the essentials in life. And I get that too. All of their energy is being used up by these thoughts, emotions, panic. And whilst it is tough to stop those thoughts whirring in your head, especially when you quite literally fear for the life of a parent, lifelong friend or family, I think we have to be mindful of the fact that this does not change anything. It will not stop tanks in their tracks, but it will be affecting your resilience. So whilst concerns are completely valid, if those thoughts are running wild, then you should try running yourself. Literally. Run around the park, or if you can't get out, run a bath. I have a friend who used to bake like the Queen of Hearts when she was grieving. Anything goes. Do what you have to do, but stop that whirring with a loving gesture to yourself. Other people are obsessing about the news, inadvertently creating a gateway for emotional imbalance to creep into your family. Younger children particularly should be given the analogue time and space that they need right now. A little bit of TLC, tender, loving care. I want you to be mindful as well that the media has a lot to answer for. The magnitude and the intensity of the media coverage will affect our emotions around this issue. Do you remember There was a time when all they spoke about was the Brexit. Then it was all about refugees. Then it was all about COVID, Fridays for Future. And now it's about the Ukraine. And whilst it obviously deserves some media time and space, I think we have to be mindful that we tap into other news sources as well, or other news stories. And that empathy can soon turn into aggression. Let's avoid that by not jumping on bandwagons. If you prefer to do something constructive, like collecting clothes or something like that, do it. If you feel better donating, do that. But make sure that you choose very carefully. Do your homework and make sure that your money is getting to the people who really need it. Be mindful. You don't know who has family and friends that are affected. Just because they're not talking about it doesn't mean they're not impacted by it. Observe, listen, lean in and be respectful of how they want to deal with it. It could change during the course of the next few weeks, and be prepared to be flexible on that. In the agile world, you could maybe let them be the first to choose something out of the backlog, something lower urgency. Maybe they prefer to work on testing for a while where they don't have to think about things too much. Or maybe they need to catch up on documentation. If you are in a stand-up meeting situation and you think that somebody might be triggered, then give them the chance to report their progress using something silent like cards or the board. Because sometimes just by speaking, it's easy to break out emotionally and to start crying. And that might not have been their intention at that moment, but sometimes we react in different ways. If you're working in HR, you might want to consider giving somebody some emotional leave, and be mindful that emotional outbursts take a multitude of different faces, if you like. It could be tears, but it could also be shouting, lateness due to sleep deprivation, or lethargy, indifference. If you do need more information about sleep, I do have an episode about that. But in the meantime, pay attention to your media limits. We talk about this to our kids all the time. We put limits on their internet access and things like that. But what about us? Are we often up late, just checking the news one more time? Kids, and especially teenagers, are in a unique situation. They've never had to deal with this before, and neither have we. It's an alien concept, and one that we hoped that they would be spared of and would never have to deal with. They have this to deal with on top of having to develop their people skills, friendships and personalities in a low contact, safe distancing, masked era due to COVID. Maybe their energy is already depleted slightly. They're also worried about things like environmental issues threatening their very existence. And now this. Remember, parents' emotions are, to a large extent, a reflection of those of their children. When I was a little girl, my mum used to sit next to me and stroke my arm. It used to drive me crazy. She'd stroke my arm and she'd say, "Are you okay, honey?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm okay, Mum." And she'd go, "That's okay. If you're okay, I'm okay." And at the time I thought, that's a stupid thing to say. But now I'm a mother. I know exactly where she's coming from. So if you don't have children, please be a little bit thoughtful about the parents that you're working with. If your child is coming up to an age where he can be sent off to war, his concerns could be deeper than you imagine, depending on where you live. If you're noticing that teenage tensions are bubbling over, it might be time for a warm, open conversation. A drive or a walk, in my experience, can be quite a good tactic here. And the closer you get to nature, the easier it is. And I know, getting teenagers out of the house can be difficult enough. Woo them with a burger if you need to, but strolling through the woods can turn on the conversational taps at a time and pace to suit them. Now is not the time for advice. Just listen and ask questions to find out more. Where are they emotionally? War in a country unprotected by NATO might seem a safe distance away, but the media coverage is shocking and intense. But remember, it's sensationalist because media needs eyeballs to survive. So I would urge you to be really smart, not just about how much media and news you are consuming, but where you are consuming it. As confident speakers of English, we are in the fortunate position to be able to tune into a phenomenally broad range of different media sources. Use that privilege. Use this communications superpower to gain an international knowledge perspective based on facts, not emotion. Ask yourself, is this sensationalism or professional journalism? Listen carefully to what is being said. Really, really listen. Tune into the words because it is tempting as we are pulled in emotionally by the visuals to get distracted or influenced. We neglect to listen carefully to whether it is suspected, allegedly, probably, or it really is so. Sophisticated nations have access to the facts, so make sure you're feeding your mind and soul with the truth. Try to be curious too. As you know, I often talk about communication being a two-way street, a dance, or two sides of the coin. There are always two sides to every story, two perceptions, two ideas, two backgrounds. Which comments, events, and decisions have triggered Putin? What makes him so insecure to take such actions? Why does he tell lies? Are they lies? What does he want? What does he really want? It's easy, probably lazy, to write him off as a power-crazed idiot, but we're all motivated by something, aren't we? What is it? What's driving him? As effective communicators, we need to really invest time and energy in trying to understand the other person in the conversation. Once you know how someone ticks, that's when you can start really making an impact with your communication. A war is the result of communication gone disastrously wrong. Just like any business conversation is affecting your professional reputation, your conversations around the news affect how you are perceived as an individual. If you want to appear informed, smart, and analytical, you'll have to explore more sources and think about it deeply rather than just repeating. Form an educated opinion. The conversations in your head also affect your resilience and your mental health. The conversations at home might be worrying your kids. The conversations at work, or worse still, about team members struggling to deal with this emotionally, will have an effect on your reputation. Do they see you as a leader, leaning in to support the whole team, or do they see you as something else? If there's war in your head, you can't perform. So practice some self-care this week, and next, and the week after. Be considerate of those around you. Practice some compassion by observing, completely devoid of judgment. Monitor your media exposure and practice analysing and articulating your own opinions at a safe distance from the bandwagon. Run away from those thoughts. If they are beginning to take over, feel the earth beneath your feet or feel the water soothe your soul. It was great to spend some time with you today, and I know I'm a bit less upbeat than normal, but if you're curious about media evaluation, articulating your opinions clearly or compassionately, or communicating to sensitive employees, then the great news is that all of this and more will be covered in the English-speaking expert modules, And we'll be practicing too in our live co-working sessions. So, to become one of just 50 English-speaking experts worldwide, head over to bitesizeenglish.com/club. That's it for today. I hope that you have learnt something from today's short podcast, and I will be back next week with another communication podcast. Until then, be the very best communicator that you can be. Take care, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Goodbye. It's Corinne Wilhelm from the Clever Together podcast.